Welcome back, guys, to Blackout War Stories. 74% of you still haven't subscribed. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. At 0137 on November 18, 1983, a patrol radioed two words, "Not ours," then they disappeared. The cold pressed through the uniform and settled into bone. We were stationed near the timberline in a remote sector of West Germany, not far from the border that cut Europe in half. Back then, everything felt like it could spark into something bigger. Orders were strict, movement was limited, and rumors about Soviet patrols crossing into the forest had been circling for weeks. That night, a routine patrol went out. 4 men, all of them younger than me, though I wasn't old by any stretch. I was 24, still trying to hide my nerves behind the habit of lighting cheap cigarettes and pretending my hands weren't shaking. But those 4 had the look of soldiers who still believed rules kept them safe. We watched them disappear into the blackness of the pines, their radios crackling faintly as they checked in with the outpost. The forest out there was unforgiving. During the day, it was a wall of trees where the light barely broke through. At night, it was another world entirely. You could hear branches creaking as if the woods themselves were alive, twisting in secret ways. We always joked it was easier to fight the Cold War from a desk, because in the field, you felt every shadow breathing down your neck. They were supposed to be back by 0200 hours, standard sweep, nothing unusual. But at 0137, one of them broke radio silence. The voice came through static, harsh, panicked, clipped. "Copy, movement, North Ridge, not ours. Repeat, not ours." Then a burst of interference swallowed the rest. I grabbed the receiver, pressed down hard enough to make my knuckles pale, and called back for confirmation. No answer, just the hiss of open air. We tried again. Another operator joined me, twisting dials, checking frequencies. Nothing. The patrol had vanished from our grid as though someone had cut their line off the map. At first, command told us not to overreact. Probably a radio failure, they said. Signal bouncing off the ridge. But I'd heard the strain in that voice. Men don't fake that tone. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't interference. And it wasn't the sound of someone who lost his way. By 0300, we were told to stand down and wait for daylight. Official word was that the patrol had likely holed up somewhere, maybe avoiding detection if they'd stumbled across a Soviet recon team. Still, no flares, no signals, no contact. What haunted me wasn't just the silence, it was the way the forest looked when the sun rose. A search team went out at first light. I was assigned to the perimeter, watching the tree line as others pushed into the timber. The pines stood still, their branches heavy with frost, but there was no sign of a firefight. No shell casings, no tracks past a certain point. The snow swallowed everything, leaving nothing but an untouched blanket that seemed too clean, too perfect. Hours passed. Radios buzzed back and forth with nothing to report. By afternoon, command had shifted its tone. The search was no longer casual. Men were ordered to comb every ridge, every gully, every frozen creek bed. Still nothing. It was as if the patrol had walked into the forest and dissolved into thin air. Later that evening, command cut the search short. We were told to file reports, stick to official wording, and never discuss speculation. 4 men gone, no trace, no evidence. It was marked down as unresolved. That word unresolved burned into me. Soldiers don't just vanish. Equipment breaks, ambushes happen, men run. But vanish? Number. The rest of us whispered theories in low voices over cold rations. Some swore they'd heard faint gunfire in the distance. Others claimed they saw light moving between the trees where no one should have been. None of it was written down. None of it made it past the walls of the outpost. That was the beginning of Operation Black Timber. The night a routine patrol went out into the woods and never came back. The night we realized there were things in that forest we weren't supposed to know about. And I know this much. It wasn't just enemy soldiers hiding beyond the ridge. Something else was happening out there. Something they told us to bury, even as we kept standing watch. What came next would make me question everything I thought I knew about the war we were fighting. After that night, everything at the outpost shifted. You could feel it in the air, like the static before a storm. Officially, we were told to treat the patrol as missing, presumed compromised. Those were the words, but they never explained what compromised meant. Soldiers know when they're being handled. We'd all been briefed enough times to spot the difference between standard orders and something that carried the weight of classification. This was the second kind, November 19th, 0600. Comms room, with Holloway and Lindstrom, a clean-pressed major I'd never seen weighted by the maps. He didn't look like the type who'd spent nights in the cold or mud. His uniform was clean, pressed, and his boots looked like they'd been worn twice. He spoke like a memo. "The patrol did not vanish," he said. "They were reassigned, effective 0200. That was the line. Reassigned? But it made no sense. Men don't get reassigned in the middle of a sweep through frozen timber at 0200. They get reassigned after paperwork, after orders are read, after someone at least signs off. And I'd seen their names on the roster. They were supposed to be out there with us, not on some phantom assignment. We didn't argue. You don't argue with majors you don't recognize. We just nodded and kept our mouths shut. But when I glanced at Holloway, I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't buying it either. Life at the outpost carried on, but not in the same way. The mess hall got quieter. Cigarettes burned down without much talking. Even card games lost their energy. Soldiers don't like mysteries, not ones that close. Every empty bunk reminded us that 4 men had gone out and 4 men hadn't come back. I kept replaying the last radio call in my head. The clipped voice, the words, "not ours." He didn't say enemy, didn't say Soviet, didn't say contact, just "not ours." That phrasing stuck with me. Who else could be out there? We were miles from civilian areas, deep in restricted timberland. Hunters wouldn't be wandering that ridge at night. Locals stayed clear of the border zone. And yet someone was. We were stationed at Black Timber. That's what we called it, though officially it had a string of numbers and letters. Black Timber was never on maps. It was one of those forward listening posts set up to track Soviet movement. A cluster of prefab buildings, camouflaged nets, and radio towers sitting on ground that always felt borrowed. There were about 30 of us stationed there. Not many, enough to run shifts, man the perimeter, keep eyes on the line. Supplies came in by convoy once every 2 weeks. Most of the time, we lived in the rhythm of watch duty, drills, and the occasional patrol. The forest pressed in on every side. Some nights, the silence was so complete you could hear your own pulse. Other nights, it carried sounds that made you think twice about stepping out past the lights. Rumors had always run through the place. Strange lights seen at a distance, movements in the trees that didn't match animal patterns, occasional radio static that carried voices we couldn't trace. Usually, we chalked it up to boredom, tricks of the mind, or Soviet jamming. But after the patrol vanished, those rumors felt sharper, closer. I started a small, unofficial notebook, times, sectors, odd events kept under my mattress. Not the kind of thing you'd ever hand over to command. In it, I logged the date, time, and any detail that stood out. The strange thing was, once I started writing things down, the pattern grew clearer. Interference on the radio always happened in the same sector, North Ridge. Odd noises in the distance were often reported by different guards on separate nights, but always between 100 and 300. The ridge itself became a ghost in our conversations. No one wanted to be posted near it. Men would smoke faster when they had watch facing north. Some swore the trees looked thicker there, like they grew closer together to hide something. Still, there was no proof, and soldiers are trained to need proof before acting. All we had was silence, rumors, and missing men. About a week later, I got pulled into another closed-door meeting. This time, it wasn't just the major. There were 2 men in plain uniforms, no rank insignia. They carried folders but didn't open them. One of them asked me to recount exactly what I'd heard over the radio the night the patrol disappeared. I told him word for word, as clear as I could. Movement, North Ridge, not ours. The man nodded once, didn't write anything down. Then he asked me if I was certain. I told him yes. He asked again, slower this time. Again, I said yes. The second man leaned forward. Then forget it. His voice was cold, flat, like stone. That transmission did not happen. It was the kind of thing you don't argue with, but you don't forget either. We never saw those men again. The major disappeared too. Command replaced him with someone else, a captain we already knew, and the message was clear. Everything was normal. But nothing was normal. At night, when I closed my eyes, I kept hearing the static and the words through the noise. Not ours. I'd wake up sweating, heart pounding, certain that if I stepped outside, I'd find those 4 men standing in the dark, frozen in place, waiting. I wasn't the only one losing sleep. Holloway started pulling longer shifts on the perimeter, like he didn't trust the new orders. Lindstrom, the radio tech, stopped joking around and barely touched his food. Even the younger guys, the ones who'd usually blow off tension with crude jokes or songs, kept their voices low. Something was wrong in that forest, and all of us knew it. We just couldn't say it out loud. The worst part was the silence from the outside. No one back home would ever hear about the 4 missing men. Their families would be told they were reassigned or transferred or lost in an accident. The truth was already buried before it left the outpost. That realization hit me harder than I expected. It meant that whatever we were involved in, it wasn't about us. It was bigger, classified, something only a handful of people were allowed to know. But secrets like that don't stay buried forever. They leave traces, whispers, doubts. And for those of us stuck in the middle of it, the secret began to eat at us more than the cold or the fear of the enemy. Because deep down, we understood the truth. The patrol hadn't been reassigned. They hadn't been lost to weather or accidents. They'd been swallowed by something we were never supposed to see. And soon more of us would be sent into the timber to find out what. That was how Black Timber became more than just a listening post. It became a place where men learned that the war they thought they were fighting wasn't the only one. And as I'd soon discover, the search for the missing patrol was only the beginning. 2 days after that meeting with the men in plain uniforms, orders came down. We were to form a new patrol and sweep the same ridge where the others had gone missing. The room went quiet when the announcement was read. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but we all felt the same thing. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was a test. Command wanted to see if the ridge would take more of us. They picked 8 men this time, double the number. I was on the list along with Holloway and Lindstrom. The others were a mix of new blood and steady hands. Some tried to hide their nerves, adjusting straps and cleaning rifles that didn't need cleaning. Others just stared at the map, as if staring long enough would change what it showed. The map was simple. Our patrol line curved along the timber, up the ridge and back down again. Easy on paper. But we all knew it wasn't about the lines. It was about what waited between them. We set out at dusk. The sky was a low ceiling of gray, the kind that promised more snow. Our boots crunched against the frozen ground, rifles slung across our chests, radios strapped tight. The forest swallowed us quickly. The deeper we went, the more it felt like the trees were closing in. Branches creaked overhead, bending under the weight of frost. Every so often, a gust of wind would shake the limbs, and a shower of ice crystals would fall like glass, breaking in slow motion. Holloway led the column. He didn't talk much, just raised his hand for signals when we needed to pause. Lindstrom stayed near the middle, radio set strapped across his back. I took the rear, scanning the trees, ears tuned for any sound that didn't belong. The first hour passed without incident. Just the steady rhythm of boots, the crunch of snow, the hiss of our breath. But as the light faded, the forest grew different. The silence thickened, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. It was then we found the first sign, a torn piece of fabric snagged on a branch, faded green, military issue. Holloway pulled it down, turned it over in his hand. It was stiff, frozen, but unmistakable. "Belonged to one of ours," he muttered. No one spoke. We didn't need to. It confirmed what we already knew: the missing patrol had come this way. We pressed on, slower now, eyes searching every branch, every patch of snow. The ridge loomed ahead, a dark wall of trees climbing into the night. That's when the radio hissed. Static first, then faint clicks. Lindstrom froze, lifted the handset to his ear. We all stopped, watching him. "Say again," he whispered into the mouthpiece. "This is Patrol 3. Repeat your last." Nothing, just the hiss. Then through the static, a single word. "North." It was faint, broken, almost buried in the noise, but we all heard it. Lindstrom looked at Holloway. His face was pale, the radio shaking slightly in his hand. "Same frequency as before," he whispered. The order was clear. We pushed north, up the ridge. The climb was slow, the slope coated in ice and loose snow. Every step had to be careful. The trees leaned closer together here, their trunks tight, branches weaving like a cage. The deeper we went, the harder it became to see the sky. Halfway up, Corporal Finch, one of the younger guys, stopped and pointed. At first I didn't see it, then my eyes adjusted. A trail, shallow impressions in the snow, half filled by frost but shaped like boots. 4 sets, side by side. The missing patrol. We followed the tracks, hearts hammering, breaths clouding the cold air. The trail led higher, winding between the pines. Then just as suddenly it stopped. The boot prints ended mid-clearing as if a sentence cut off without a period. No struggle, no drag marks, no scatter. Just stopped. The men shifted uneasily, muttering under their breath. Holloway raised a hand for silence, but I could see his jaw tighten. Something about that clearing felt wrong. The snow was untouched, smooth as glass, except for the boot prints that ended like they'd been erased. The air was colder there too, sharp in the lungs, heavy in the chest. We formed a circle, scanning outward, rifles raised. Nothing moved. No birds, no wind, not even the creak of branches. Just silence so deep it pressed against the ears. Then the radio crackled again. "Ours, not ours." The same voice, the same clipped tone. Lindstrom flinched, the handset thudding into snow. "That's them," he whispered. "That's one of the 4. But it couldn't be. That transmission had come nearly 2 weeks ago. We stayed in that clearing longer than we should have, waiting for something. A sign, a sound, anything. But the woods gave us nothing. Holloway finally gave the order to pull back. "Mark the site," he told me. "We'll report it in." I drove a stake into the snow, tied a strip of tape around it, and logged the coordinates in my notebook. But even as I wrote them down, I knew command wouldn't want to see them. They already knew. We moved down the ridge as night settled, the trees swallowing what little light remained. Every sound felt closer now. Branches snapping, snow shifting, the crunch of boots echoing longer than they should. Men glanced over their shoulders more than they looked ahead. By the time we reached the outpost, the silence of the ridge had followed us. None of us spoke in the debrief. Holloway wrote a short report, stripped of detail, just as we knew command wanted. Evidence of patrol movement. No contact. Area secure. That night, I lay awake in my bunk, staring at the ceiling. The words from the radio looped in my head, tangled with the image of boot prints ending in untouched snow. Not ours. It wasn't just a warning. It was a truth. Whatever had taken those men, whatever moved through those woods, didn't belong to us. And I knew it was only a matter of time before command sent us back into the timber again, because black timber wasn't done with us. Not yet. The morning after we came back from the ridge, command acted like nothing had happened. Holloway's stripped-down report was stamped, filed, and forgotten before the ink was dry. No one asked about the boot prints, the clearing, or the voice on the radio. But soldiers talk, even when they're told not to. The 8 of us who went out kept quiet around command. But in the mess hall, the whispers started. Finch, the youngest, couldn't hold it in. He told 2 others about the prints ending in the snow. By nightfall, half the outpost knew. Rumors spread faster than fire in a dry field. Some men said the Soviets had developed new tech, something that could jam signals, scramble mines, even erase trails. Others said the forest itself was cursed, that the Germans had used the timber as a weapons site during the last war. No one really believed it, but no one dismissed it either. Not after what we'd seen. 2 days later, new orders came in. This time, the mission was different. We weren't going back out on patrol. We were to stay inside the outpost, on high alert. No more sweeps, no more scouting. Command was sending in another unit to handle the situation. The trucks were flat black, unmarked doors opened, no salutes, no names. Men in plain gear stepped out, faces hard, weapons heavier than ours. They didn't salute. They didn't introduce themselves. They just moved past us like we weren't there. They carried crates into the comms room, locked the doors, and set up equipment none of us had ever seen. Antennas, sealed cases, cables coiled like snakes. They worked quietly, never speaking more than a few words to each other. Whatever they were doing, it wasn't standard, and it sure as hell wasn't something Command wanted on the books. Holloway pulled me aside that night. We sat outside the barracks, sharing a cigarette in the freezing air. "You see the way they move?" he said, smoke curling out of his mouth. "Not grunts. Not regular intel either." I nodded. "Who do you think they are?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the timberline. His eyes narrowed. "Doesn't matter. What matters is why they're here, and why we're not allowed back on the ridge." I thought about the boot prints, the voice on the radio, the way the snow had looked too perfect. Holloway was right. Whatever this was, it wasn't our fight anymore. But that didn't mean we could ignore it. That night I heard something outside my barracks window. A faint hum, low and steady. At first I thought it was the black trucks idling, but when I peeked out, the vehicles were dark. The sound was coming from the tree line. It wasn't mechanical, not like an engine. It was deeper, almost like a vibration in the air. It lasted a full minute, then faded into silence. The next morning I asked around. 2 others had heard it too. Finch swore the ground had trembled under his bunk. Lindstrom said his radio picked up a pulse of static at the same moment, sharp enough to blow his earpiece. We reported it, of course. The captain waved it off. "Equipment interference. Don't concern yourselves." But his eyes told a different story. He'd heard it too. By the end of the week, tension inside the outpost was unbearable. The men in black kept to themselves, but we saw the way they looked at us, like we weren't supposed to be there, like we were witnesses instead of soldiers. Then came the worst part. Morning formation, Finch's bunk made, rifle locked, initials carved into a chair, no Finch. His bunk was empty, his gear still folded, rifle still locked. No sign of a struggle, just gone, like the 4 before him. Panic spread fast. Some said he'd lost it and run into the forest on his own. Others said the men in black had taken him. Holloway tried to calm everyone down, but even he couldn't explain it. Command didn't issue a search, didn't even acknowledge Finch was missing. The captain told us he'd been transferred. That word again, transferred. But I'd shared a smoke with Finch the night before. He'd been laughing, talking about what he'd do when his service was up. Men don't just vanish between one laugh and the next. I started writing more in my notebook. Dates, times, names, every odd detail, every unexplained sound. I didn't trust Command to keep a record, so I made my own. One entry still stands out. December 3rd, 1983, 02:15 hours. Heard the hum again, louder this time. Snow shook off the trees. Radio spiked into static. Faint light seen through timber, pale and shifting. Not flares, not fire. We weren't allowed outside the perimeter that night. Orders were clear: stay inside, stay silent. But from the guard tower, I saw it with my own eyes. A glow moving between the trees, steady and slow, like something was scanning the forest. When I reported it, the captain didn't even write it down. He just stared at me, jaw tight, and said, "Forget what you saw." Forget. That was becoming the word of black timber. The breaking point came the following week. Lindstrom caught a transmission at 0300, not static this time, a voice. Clear, direct, carried across the frequency like someone was standing right beside him. "Help us!" That was all. 2 words, over and over, before the signal died. He ran straight to me, pale and shaking. "It was them," he said. "It was the missing patrol, I swear it." We brought it to Holloway. He listened, jaw set, then told us to keep quiet. "If Command finds out, they'll shut this place down tighter than it already is." "But if they're alive," Lindstrom started. Holloway cut him off. "Alive or not, we're not supposed to know. Don't you get it? We're not here to find them. We're here to be kept in the dark." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those 2 words. Help us. Were they trapped, wounded, lost in some part of the ridge we hadn't searched? Or were we hearing something else? Something Command already understood and was hiding. The outpost felt smaller with every hour. The men in black watched us closer, their eyes cold. More guards were posted at the gates, but not to keep things out, to keep us in. And in that silence, in that cage of frost and secrecy, I realized something that made my stomach turn. The missing patrol wasn't the only secret buried in black timber. We were part of it now, whether we wanted to be or not. After Lindstrom caught that voice on the radio, "Help us," nothing at Black Timber was the same. Men barely slept. Meals went cold on trays, and the air carried a weight you could feel in your chest. Even the laughter, the crude jokes soldiers used to break the silence, had vanished. We were trapped between orders and the truth. Orders said, "Forget." The truth was screaming through the radio, even if no one wanted to hear it. Holloway broke the silence before it broke us. We were in the barracks, the stove barely keeping the frost off the windows, when he spoke up. His voice was low but steady. "They're alive," he said, "or something's left of them. And if we sit here waiting for command, we'll never know what happened. We'll just rot in this place until it swallows us too." Lindstrom nodded right away. He looked like a man about to break in half, clutching the radio logs he'd been hiding. Finch's empty bunk loomed behind us like a warning. I didn't say yes at first. I'd been around long enough to know what happens when soldiers break orders. But then I thought about that clearing, the boot prints ending in the snow. I thought about the glow in the timber, the hum that rattled the ground, and I thought about the voice, "Help us." So when Holloway asked again, I gave a slow nod. We made our plans simple. 3 of us would slip out after midnight, while most of the outpost was asleep, and the men in black were buried in their comms room. We'd take minimal gear, no headlights, no heavy packs, just rifles, radios, and enough rations for a night. The goal wasn't to fight, it was to see, to follow the transmissions back to their source. It was reckless, maybe even suicidal, but it felt like the only honest thing left to do. 0108 hours. We slipped past the wire. No lights, no heavy packs, just rifles and 1 radio. Snow crunched under our boots as we moved past the wire. The guard on duty at the north post barely looked up. He was one of ours, and he gave the faintest nod as we slipped into the timber. The forest swallowed us fast. The sky was clouded, no moonlight, just the faint glow of frost on the branches. We moved in silence, rifles tight to our chest, breath puffing white into the dark. Half an hour in, the radio came alive. A crackle, faint, then the words again. "Help us!" This time it was clearer, closer. Lindstrom's hands shook as he held the handset, but his voice was steady. "Copy," he whispered. "Say your location." Static. Then, north. Ridge. Hurry. We froze. The words weren't exact. They were broken, like someone pushing through heavy interference. But they were words, human words. Holloway didn't hesitate. "We go north." The ridge rose ahead of us, black shapes of trees stacked against the sky. Every step crunched too loud. Every breath felt stolen. The air grew colder, sharper, until it burned in the lungs. We reached the clearing, the same one where the tracks had ended. The snow lay untouched again, smooth as glass, the marker I'd left already buried. It was like the forest had reset itself. Then the hum began, low at first, a vibration under the boots, rising until it pressed against the skull. The trees shuddered, frost dropping like rain. The air itself seemed to thrum. And then came the light, pale, cold, seeping between the trunks. It wasn't fire, it wasn't flares. It moved too smoothly, too controlled. It drifted through the timber, slow arcs sweeping across the clearing like a search. We dropped flat into the snow, hearts pounding. The light passed over us once, twice. I held my breath so long my chest ached. Then it shifted away, sliding deeper into the woods. "Now," Holloway hissed. "We follow." We trailed the glow for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 30 minutes. It moved ahead of us, never too far, like it wanted to be followed. The hum rose and fell, vibrating in the chest, rattling teeth. Finally, the glow stopped. It hovered at the base of a ridge wall, pale against the frost. As we drew closer, we saw it wasn't light in the normal sense. It was like mist, glowing from within, shifting shapes without edges. And then 4 figures at the edge of the pale glow. 4 figures standing at the edge of the glow, still, silent, faces pale, eyes unfocused. The missing patrol. I felt my stomach twist. They weren't dead, but they weren't alive either. Their bodies were there, their uniforms stiff with frost, but their eyes looked through us like glass. One of them opened his mouth. The voice came not from his lips, but from the radio strapped to Lindstrom's back. "Help us." Lindstrom dropped to his knees, clutching the handset. "Where are you? Tell me where you are." The figure's lips moved, but the sound came through static. "North. Ridge, hurry." The same loop, the same words as if stuck in time. Holloway raised his rifle, then lowered it. His hands were shaking. They're not themselves. I wanted to move forward, to reach them, to shake them out of whatever trance held them. But the hum rose higher, rattling my bones, pressing against my chest like a weight. The glow pulsed, brighter, harsher, until it stung the eyes. The figures turned all at once and walked into the light. Not stumbling, not hesitating, just walking. We tried to follow, but the glow thickened, blinding. The hum became a roar, shaking the trees. Snow burst from the branches, falling like ash. I hit the ground, covering my head. When it finally faded, the clearing was empty. The glow was gone. The figures were gone. The hum was gone. Only the silence remained. We staggered back, hearts hammering, ears ringing. No one spoke. We knew we'd just seen something we weren't supposed to. By the time we made it back to the outpost, dawn was breaking. The men in black were already waiting at the gates. They said nothing, just watched as we stumbled through, frost clinging to our uniforms, faces pale. The captain was there too. His eyes flicked over us, hard, cold. He didn't ask where we'd been. He didn't need to. That night, new orders came down. Effective immediately, no one was to leave the outpost perimeter. All radios were to be surrendered for calibration. Patrols suspended indefinitely. The message was clear. We'd seen too much, and they were shutting it down. I sat on my bunk, staring at my notebook, hands trembling. I wanted to write it all down, every detail, every sound, every word. But I knew if I did and it was found, I'd vanish like the others. So I just wrote one line. They are still out there. We didn't sleep after the ridge. Our bodies were dead tired, but our heads kept moving. The men in black took our radios, then our rifles, then our notebooks. They said it was for calibration, for cleaning, for inventory. The words changed, but the meaning didn't. We were being stripped down to silence. By noon, the gates were locked from the inside. Watch rotations were doubled, but not on the timberline. The extra guards were posted at the barracks and the mess hall. Anyone trying to step past the yard was turned back. We were the ones being watched. A briefing was called at 1600 in the mess. No coffee, no food, just a room full of folding chairs and cold air. The captain stood at the front with two of the plain gear men. He said there had been a misinterpretation of the radio transmissions. He said what we'd heard on the ridge was likely the result of atmospheric bounce, layered recordings, and ordinary echo. He said the human brain fills gaps under stress. He said cold and fear and repetition can turn static into words. Someone asked where Finch was. The captain didn't blink. "Transferred to rear support," he said. "His gear will be shipped." We all stared at the empty chair at the back of the room. Finch had carved his initials into it with a mess knife. They were still there. I could see them from where I sat. Holloway didn't argue in front of the room. He just raised his hand and asked for the standard form to log the ridge incident. The captain told him there wouldn't be a form. "This is handled at a higher level," he said. That was our debrief. It wasn't one. It was a lid placed over a boiling pot. After the room cleared, the two plain gear men took Holloway, Lindstrom, and me to the comm shack. They shut the door and made us sign papers. Non-disclosure, operational secrecy, penalties under the Code of Justice. The words ran together in a long line of threats. At the bottom was a line for the date. I wrote it, December 9th, 1983. I pressed hard enough to tear the paper. In the comms shack after I signed, one of them slid my notebook back, one page neatly razored out. Last night's ridge entry. The line I'd written, "They are still out there, gone." A clean tear where the page should have been. I looked up. One of the men shrugged. "You must have lost it," he said. I slid the notebook into my jacket. That night the hum came again. Low, steady, sliding through the timber like a slow wave. The ground didn't shake this time. The radios didn't screech. The men in black didn't flinch. They must have known it was coming. For the first time, I asked myself if the sound wasn't the enemy at all, but us. The next morning, the black trucks rolled out toward the north approach. They took the service road that even our convoys rarely used. I watched from the tower as they moved without lights and turned down the old logging track just below the ridge. 10 minutes later, nothing. The forest swallowed them like it swallowed everything. I asked the tower relief if he'd ever noticed that road. He said he had once, before the first snow, but it ended at a washout. Nothing past it, he said. I shook my head. There's always something past it. We were back to drills by noon. Empty drills. No ammo, no live fire, just movement. Keep the body tired, keep the mind quiet. That was the point. But the mind does not sit still simply because someone tells it to. 2 days later, the captain said a resupply was inbound. We formed up to unload. The convoy rolled in at dusk. 2 green trucks we knew and 1 black truck we didn't. The green trucks had canned food, fuel, blankets. The black truck had sealed crates with no markings and 2 guards who were not ours. They carried the crates into the comm shack. They posted a man at the door with a set of keys. He looked through us like we were snow. That night, Holloway came to my bunk, sat, and shut his eyes for a long moment like he was choosing which part of his soul he could risk. I can't sit under this anymore, he said. I need to see it myself in daylight. See what? Whatever they built up there. He didn't say who, he said they. He meant our side. I followed him without argument. We told no one, not even Lindstrom. Not because we didn't trust him, we did, but because he was holding together by a thread. If he came and saw what we were going to see, I wasn't sure he'd make it back. We slipped out at first light, in the half hour before the watch change, when faces are tired and coffee is weak. We walked the perimeter like we were supposed to, then stepped past it like we weren't. We moved through the timber, keeping the outpost behind a screen of trees until it was just a shape in the gray. The snow was heavy, the cold so clean it cut. We took the long way, no direct line, no straight climb, working the slope like we'd learned in training. It was slow, careful. We hardly spoke. Near the top of the north approach, we found a strip of ground where the snow was thinner, stamped with tire patterns. They weren't old. The edges were crisp. Holloway crouched, touched one groove, then looked at me. He didn't have to say it. The black trucks had been here. We followed the tracks around a bend in the ridge. The trees opened onto a narrow shelf of rock, just wide enough for a truck to slide by. On the other side stood a wall of timber and stone. It took a long blink to see the door, flush with rock, the color of lichen and ice. It was flush with the rock, painted the color of ice and lichen, cut into the ridge like a wound. It had no handle, only a vertical seam and a small metal plate set in the stone. The snow around it was hard and smooth, tamped by boots. A black cable ran from the plate into the timber and out of sight. We stared in silence. There were no signs, no flags, nothing to say who owned it. But it didn't need a label. It was ours. Built by people who talk in short words and lock everything they build. Storage? I said. Holloway shook his head. Not storage. We didn't touch the door. We didn't step any closer than we had to. We took the scene in like we were taking a photo in our heads, then backed away the way we'd come, careful not to cross new paths or leave prints that didn't match the tire tracks. Back at the outpost, the captain was waiting for us in the yard with 2 of the plane gear men. He didn't ask where we'd been. He told us to hand over our gloves, then check the snow melt on the cuffs. He stepped forward, close enough that I could see the thread in his collar. "You're soldiers," he said low. "Act like it and stay away from the ridge. If you want to live long enough to rotate out of here, you will follow orders." Then he told the plane gear men to take us to the mess. We sat alone for an hour while our names were radioed to somewhere we never saw. When they let us out, our bunks had fresh sheets and our footlockers were not where we left them. 2 days later, a new name appeared on the roster. Not Finch, not the 4. A special liaison, scheduled to arrive before the weekend. The message was short. He will set terms. Terms for what was left unsaid. The liaison came late on a Friday. Thin, gray, overcoat, too clean for the season. He shook the captain's hand and not a single one of ours. He spent an hour in the comm shack, then called a meeting in the barracks. We stood in a line with cold ears and colder hands while he spoke. He said no one had vanished. He said our records would reflect routine rotation. He said letters would be drafted for the families of the four and for Finch, addressing the good service of their sons and the necessity of transfers. He said these letters would be signed by names we recognized and mailed from cities we trusted. Then he took off his gloves and rolled his shoulders like a man finishing a small chore. That is the administrative side, he said. The operational side is simpler. The activity near the ridge is friendly. It is technology being tested. It is beyond your need to know. It can create audio bleed on field frequencies. It can produce light you will mistake for movement. It can cause low-frequency resonance that you will feel in your bones. It is not a threat to you unless you make it a threat. He looked at each of us, one by one, his eyes flat. You will not speak of this to anyone inside or outside this installation. Not your fellow soldiers, not your families, no one. Holloway's jaw moved just once. He didn't raise his hand. He just said, "What about the men we saw?" The liaison didn't blink. "You saw what you wanted to see." Then softer. "You saw what the system lets you see when you walk into its field without protection." "What system?" I asked. My voice came out harsher than I meant. He turned his head toward me. A slow pivot. "A shield, if you like. A blind. It makes a corridor where we can observe things without being observed. It is not perfect. It will bleed into the environment. Your job is to keep your people away from it." He slipped on his gloves and stepped toward the door. Then he paused. "If any of you were recorded saying otherwise," he said, "those recordings will be corrected." He left us standing with cold hands in a new kind of silence. Not the hush of snow or the pause between orders. A silence that seals a story in a room and throws away the key. That night, I wrote in my notebook again. I listed his words: audio bleed, light mistaken for movement, resonance, tools, not magic, not ghosts, human-made, made to confuse, to conceal, to move heat and sound and signal in a way that turned men into blind figures in their own forest. I wanted to believe it was all of it. I needed to believe that. But when I closed my eyes, I saw four men standing in a pale pool of light and turning away from me like the light itself had given them their orders. A week later, transfers came through for the three of us. Not punishment, at least not on paper. Reassignments to rear logistics. We packed our duffels in a quiet room and stripped our bunks. Lindstrom held his radio the way a man holds the last photo he has of someone. He set it down on the footlocker and closed the lid like he was closing a lid on a casket. Before we left, I climbed the tower one more time at dawn. The timber line was a black seam against a dull sky. The ridge sat heavy, the same as the first day I saw it, the same as the night the voice cut through the static. The hum did not come. The glow did not rise. The world looked clean and empty and false. The truck ride out was slow. The road was ice. We warmed our hands on our breath and watched the trees pass. At the last turn, where the forest thins and the road joins the highway, I looked back. The outpost was already gone, tucked into the timber like it had never been there. Rear logistics was quiet, a place for forms and boxes and signatures. We took apart crates and stacked them and stamped dates. Days passed clean and empty, and I told myself I liked it. I told myself I had been given a second life. But every time the light flickered in the warehouse, every time a transformer hummed, every time a radio test bled over the speaker from somewhere in the building, my stomach tightened and my skin prickled. I sent a letter to Finch's mother. I didn't write much. I said he was a good soldier. I said he kept spirits up in the cold. I said he talked about home with a smile on his face. I did not mention the word transfer. I did not mention the ridge. I did not mention the chair with his initials carved into it. A month later, the letter came back. Forwarding service ended. No forwarding address. Another quiet. Years went by like boots on steady ground. New units rotated in and out of places no one marks on maps. I saw reports about emerging battlefield systems, directed energy, electronic deception, ground-based low-frequency arrays that can shake a valley like a hand shakes a branch. UAV decoys, signal mirrors. Ideas that turn vision into clay and sound into smoke. When I read those words, the hum from the ridge returned to my chest like it had slept there, waiting. Every so often, I check public records, places you can look when you have patience and time. I filed a request the formal way, asking for maintenance logs of an unnamed facility in a grid square near a certain ridge in a certain winter in 1983. Months later, a folder arrived. Most of it was black bars. What wasn't black said less than what the black said. One page had a date I knew by heart, the day after we stood in that clearing. The page said, Field Test BT-12 conducted without incident. Interference within expected parameters. It also said, Personnel separation complete. It did not name the personnel. It did not mention 4 men or a boy who carved his initials into a chair. When the Cold War ended on paper, the snow in my head did not melt. The ridge stayed right where it was. I dreamed of it less, but when I did, the dreams were sharp. I stood at the door cut into stone, and a voice behind it said nothing. I woke in a sweat and listened for a hum that was not there. I do not know if the 4 died on that ridge, or if they were folded into the field of a system that turned them into ghosts with tags we could not read. I do not know if Finch was taken away to make the math cleaner, or because he saw something small and true that the big thing could not allow. I know only that we were asked to forget, and that forgetting was the one order I could not carry, even when I obeyed it. There are days I tell myself that every sound we heard, every light we followed, was us, our side, a test built above our heads and under our feet, a machine made by people who never have to sleep in the places where their machines hum. On those days, I am angry, and the anger keeps me steady. Then there are days when the hum slips back into my chest and the light rises on its own, and I think about the empty part of the snow where the tracks ended, clean as glass. I remember the stillness of 4 faces and the radio speaking in a voice that did not match the lips that moved. And I do not look for answers. I just sit with it like a piece of metal in the pocket of an old coat. Warm from the body, but cold in the hand when you take it out. If you ask me what happened at Black Timber, I can give you the official line. Routine rotation, equipment interference, no contact. I can give you the soldier's line. Men went out and didn't come back. I can give you the line the liaison used. Systems, parameters, bleed. But there's another line I cannot write on a report because there is no box for it. It is the line between what we are told we saw and what we did see, between the word friendly and the feeling of being hunted by something built by hands like ours. I live on that line. I think many who served do, in one way or another. And that is why I am telling this now, after years of keeping it tight behind my teeth. Not because I can prove any of it, not because I want a medal or a fight, but because silence, like a hum, builds a pressure that will crack whatever holds it. I don't know if the ridge still hums or if the hum just moved into me. I do not know if the door is still there or if it was buried by men who make neat edges and smooth ground. I do know that the story did not end when our truck rolled away from the timber. Stories like this do not end. They fall quiet and wait. The thing about quiet is that it always breaks, and when it does, someone has to be ready to say what they heard. I have one more part to say, and I'll say it plain. Then you can decide for yourself what to carry and what to leave on the snow. I'm old now, but Black Timber hasn't aged a day. My hands shake when I hold a pen, and my knees ache when I stand too long. But some memories don't wear out with the body. They stay sharp, like glass under the skin. Black Timber is one of those. When people ask me about my time in the service, I give them the simple answers. Cold winters, long nights. The kind of brotherhood that only comes when men freeze side by side. I don't mention the ridge. I don't mention the hum or the glow or the way the snow erased tracks like it had orders to obey. Most of the men from that outpost are gone now. Holloway passed years back, never said a word about what we saw. Lindstrom drank himself into silence and died before he turned 40. Finch's name never showed up on any official roll. It's like he was never born. And the 4 who went out that night in November '83, they're shadows. Their families were told stories neat enough to fold into letters and hide in drawers. Sometimes I wonder if I should have spoken sooner. Maybe in the '90s when everything cracked open and secrets started leaking out. But then I remember the look in the Liaison's eyes, that cold warning that some truths were designed to stay buried. Maybe I stayed alive this long because I kept my mouth shut, or maybe I just convinced myself of that. What I do know is this: war isn't only fought with bullets and borders, it's fought with silence, with things you're told not to see, not to hear, not to remember. Black Timber wasn't about ground or maps. It was about keeping men quiet while something larger moved in the dark. And yet, even after all these years, I still hear the radio in my sleep. That voice, steady, clipped, almost pleading. Help us. Maybe it was only a recording, a trick of some machine. Maybe it was real. I'll never know. The truth is, some questions don't get answered. They just stay with you, shaping the way you see the world. I've kept the notebook all these years. Most of the pages are worn thin, the ink fading, but the entries are still there. The dates, the times, the small signs that something was wrong. The missing page, the one they tore out, still sits as a scar between December 8th and December 10th. I don't need the words. I remember what I wrote. They are still out there, and I believe that. Not in a ghost story way, not in some nightmare. I believe it because men don't just vanish, and because silence doesn't erase truth. Whatever happened in that forest, whether it was a weapon, a test, or something we never had the language for, it marked us. It marked me. So here it is, spoken plain after decades of silence. Operation Black Timber, a patrol that went out and never came back. A ridge that hummed like a living thing. A truth that was filed under transfer and buried under snow. I don't tell this for closure. There isn't any. I tell it because some things deserve to be carried into the open air, even if they come too late to matter. And if one night you find yourself walking under tall timber with snow crunching under your boots, and you hear a low hum rolling through the ground, or a voice in the static asking for help, you'll know it's not just a story. It's a piece of history no one wanted you to hear. You're still watching without subscribing? Make sure you don't miss the next story. Subscribe now and share with your friends. Tell us your country, the time you're watching, and any real-life incident like this, then post it in the comments.